Rashida Tlaib gave an emotional and passionate speech today on the floor of the House of Representatives because Republicans are trying to censor her for her remarks about Israel and Palestine.
I'm the only Palestinian-American serving in Congress, Mr. Chair, and my perspective is needed here now more than ever. I will not be silenced, and I will not let you distort my words. Folks forget I'm from the city of Detroit, the most beautiful, blackest city in the country, where I learned to speak truth to power even if my voice shakes. Trying to bully or censor me won't work because this movement for a ceasefire is much bigger than one person. It's growing every single day. There are millions of people across our country who oppose Netanyahu's extremism and are done watching our government support collective punishment and the use of white phosphorus bombs that melt flesh to the bone. They are done watching our government, Mr. Chair, supporting cutting off food, water, electricity, and medical care to millions of people with nowhere to go. Like me, Mr. Chair, they don't believe the answer to war crimes is more war crimes. The refusal of Congress and the administration to acknowledge Palestinian lives is chipping away at my soul. Over 10,000 Palestinians have been killed. Majority were children. But let me be clear. My criticism has always been of the Israeli government and Netanyahu's actions. It is important to separate people and governments, Mr. Chair. No government is beyond criticism. The idea that criticizing the government of Israel is anti-Semitic sets a very dangerous precedent, and it's being used to silence diverse voices speaking up for human rights across our nation. Do you realize what it's like, Mr. Chair, for the people outside the chamber right now, listening in agony to their own government dehumanizing them? To hear the President of the United States we helped elect dispute death tolls as we see video after video of dead children and parents under rubble? Mr. Chair, do you know what it's like to fear rising hate crimes, to know how Islamophobia and anti-Semitism makes us all less safe, and worry that your own child might suffer the horrors that 6-year-old Wadia did in Illinois? I can't believe I have to say this, but Palestinian people are not disposable. We are human beings, just like anyone else. My city, my grandmother, like all Palestinians, just wants to live her life with freedom and human dignity we all deserve. Speaking up to save lives, Mr. Chair, no matter faith, no matter ethnicity, should not be controversial in this chamber. The cries of the Palestinian and Israeli children sound no different to me. What I don't understand is why the cries of Palestinians sound different to you all. We cannot lose our shared humanity, Mr. Chair. I hear the voices of advocates in Israel, in Palestine, across America, and around the world for peace. I am inspired by the courageous survivors in Israel who have lost loved ones, yet are calling for a ceasefire and the end to violence. I am grateful to the people in the streets for the peace movement, with countless Jewish Americans across the country standing up and lovingly saying, "Not in our name." We will continue to call for a ceasefire, Mr. Chair, for the immediate delivery of critical humanitarian aid to Gaza, for the release of all hostages and those arbitrarily detained, and for every American to come home. We will continue to work for a real lasting peace that upholds human rights and dignity of all people and centers in peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians, and censures no one, and ensures that no person, no child has to suffer or live in fear of violence. 71% of Michigan Democrats support a ceasefire. So you can try to censure me, but you can't silence their voices. I urge my colleagues to join with the majority of Americans and support a ceasefire now to save as many lives as possible. President Biden must listen to and represent all of us, not just some of us. I urge the President to have the courage to call for a ceasefire and the end of killings. Thank you, and I yield.
Tlaib didn't get into what she actually said, but the gist of it is that she mistakenly accredited a bombing of a Gaza hospital to Israel when the missiles were shown to be coming from inside the Gaza Strip. And she used the line from a poem that reads, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." Now, Hamas has adopted that line as a call for the destruction of Israel, but Tlaib has come out and said that that's clearly not what she meant, that she does not support the destruction of Israel or the death of any Israelis. Now, Tlaib wasn't the only person to speak on the floor of the House today. You had Republicans getting up and twisting Tlaib's words, but you had Democrats coming out and fiercely supporting their fellow Congresswoman. Now, the following speeches I'm going to play are amazing. I'd like to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Who do you think gave the best speech in defense of Tlaib? And then I'm going to end with Jamie Raskin's, his actual introductory defense of Tlaib. It is a few minutes longer than everyone else's speeches, but he, as a constitutional professor and attorney, gets into why exactly this is a dangerous trend to set for Republicans who want to censor people in the minority. So enjoy these speeches and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for future videos from Reflect. I'll see you in the next one.
St. Louis and I rise today in opposition to this censure resolution and also in opposition to the reckless manner that people in this House speak when they don't realize or don't care that they put targets on the backs of actual people, most of whom are black and brown, because of a lack of care and a lack of understanding and a lack of seeing the humanity of folks who look like Rashida Tlaib. It's outrageous that my colleagues are blatantly attempting to silence the only Palestinian-American representative right here. It's outrageous, but it's not surprising. And let me tell you, it's not surprising because this place is where 1,700 members of Congress, this elected body, enslaved black people. It's not surprising because they thought it was right. It's not surprising because this is a place where members continue to claim that the insurrection on the Capitol just appeared to look like a normal tourist visit. It's not surprising because this is the place where our black and brown staff members repeatedly speak of experiencing racism and sexism, Islamophobia, get pushed off at elevators, xenophobia, and more right here in this workplace. This is the place. And let me say this. She mourns for the 1,400 Israelis.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
She mourns for the 10,000, and she will not stop. No
gentlelady's time has expired.
Ceasefire now. And she takes the death threats that you all send, that they
The gentlelady is no longer recognized. The gentleman from Maryland.
To her, the desire to save lives is greater.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
That's what I said.
I rise in opposition to this resolution. First and foremost, can we please stop misrepresenting Representative Tlaib's words? She does not want to kill Jews. She is not in support of Hamas. She is speaking as someone who is the only Palestinian-American in U.S. history to serve in this body. Without her voice, we would lack even more empathy for the people of Palestine. We would not have someone with direct personal experience speaking against the siege that is happening now in Gaza. This body needs empathy and compassion for all people, not just people that look like the majority of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And maybe because of your lack of diversity, you lack the cognitive and emotional ability to recognize diverse opinions when they speak truth to power. And you absolutely need to open up your mind to other people and other experiences, especially when they are Muslim and when they are women and when they are people of color. You had a member of your party call my colleague a terrorist, and you didn't censor her. But we're having this conversation now about your interpretation of words.
Members are reminded to direct their comments to the chair.
I rise in opposition to this censure resolution that is blatantly Islamophobic, anti-democratic, and an utter waste of time. This resolution is as dishonest as it is unproductive. Any member who denies that Congresswoman Tlaib has opposed the killing of civilians, Israeli, Palestinian, and Americans alike, is willfully ignoring the truth. Representative Tlaib was elected by voters in Michigan to do exactly what she does best: advocate for a better, safer, more just world. She leads with love, speaks truth to power, and seeks justice even when her life and that of her family and her staff are threatened. As a daughter, mother, sister, friend, advocate, and effective duly elected three-term first ever Palestinian-American member of Congress, she has been a much-needed voice in an institution that has too often failed to listen. Today, Republicans are again attacking a Democratic colleague just because they don't like what she has to say. Another shameful but predictable ploy of distraction from the real traffickers of hate who are obsessed with policing progressive women of color. I oppose this offensive resolution for every little girl from Michigan to the Middle East who sees herself when they see the leadership of Representative Rashida Tlaib, and I urge my colleagues to do the same.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
Mr. Speaker, we should reject this resolution for a few simple reasons. First is protecting this institution. Look, I don't agree with a lot of what people say around here. I think a lot of what my Republican friends say is offensive and even racist. But I don't go around introducing censure resolutions. So if we're going to start censuring anybody who says something we don't like, all we will do from now on is censure each other all day. The second reason is freedom of speech. Look, my Republican colleagues go on and on about cancel culture, and here they are today trying to cancel someone. And I don't want any lectures from people who are trying to create a 1984-style thought police. I don't know what is wrong with them, Mr. Speaker. If this is not the high point of Republican hypocrisy, I don't know what is. To my Republican colleagues, you are unleashing something very bad here. You are setting an awful precedent for this institution. This is a very slippery slope. And I strongly urge a no vote on this resolution to protect this institution, to protect freedom of speech, and to reject this majority's cynical attempts to divide and distract America. And I would just say to my Republican friends, if you don't like listening to people you disagree with, get a new job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I come before you today in support of my colleague, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. All members of Congress are entitled to freedom of speech. We also recognize that words matter and that they have the power to uplift or to harm others. While I've joined the statement rejecting certain harmful phraseology that's been used, I believe that Congresswoman Tlaib's statement that she did not intend to wish harm to the Jewish community by her words. Congresswoman Tlaib has all since clarified that she was intending to make an aspirational call for freedom, human rights, and peaceful coexistence, not death, destruction, or hate. The ability to have free speech, but to be willing to discuss and to change and clarify is not just mature, but democratic. No member should express harm to others, and Congresswoman Tlaib has been willing to listen, clarify, and express compassion. Yet, on the other side of the aisle, we have seen repeatedly Republican members make disparaging comments that have threatened our fellow colleagues,
time has
their
expired.
families, and groups of. May I yield?
But I can yield just 10 seconds more.
Additional 10 seconds.
We have had members of the Republican conference make floor speeches about the Great Replacements theory that's suggestive of white nationalism. As a black woman, I am offended. Will you censor your co-chair of your conference?
Expired.
We need to uplift.
Gentlemen
we
from
need to allow
Maryland,
free speech.
Gentlelady is no longer recognized. Gentlelady is no longer recognized. The gentleman from Maryland
We'll reserve.
reserves.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to this resolution. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is one of only 2 Muslim American women elected to this body and the only Palestinian American in Congress. She has fought tirelessly and successfully to get clean drinking water for her constituents, to ensure that people have housing and environmental justice. If we truly want Congress to be a diverse body that represents the diversity of views across this country, we have to be willing to stand up for those diversity of views to be expressed. We don't have to agree with them, but we do have to protect the right to the freedom of speech, which this body is absolutely required to do. Our country and our world are in crisis. People are suffering everywhere. Historic and present traumas for Jews, Muslims, Arabs, South Asians, Sikhs, and so many others are playing themselves out. And we, as the elected representatives of the people, should be working together to protect the rights of every American to say what they believe and ensure that we preserve our democracy. Vote no on this terrible resolution.
The gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you to my friend. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, this censure measure is a sham. When someone who is an American, a Muslim, a woman, and a Palestinian dares to speak out for her people, she's told to be quiet. Stop talking about Palestinian brothers and sisters in the same breath as Jewish brothers and sisters. My sister Rashida is a child of the Midwest, representing the best of Midwestern sensibilities. She also exemplifies the rich tradition of the Islamic faith in the Midwest. She's a bold leader, she's a fair leader, and a compassionate leader, and most importantly, she's an American. Standing up for one oppressed people does not negate the oppression of another oppressed people. We should be working together to end this terrible suffering and eliminate these sham censors and get back to the work of the people. That's why they elected us. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is glaring hypocrisy when you have Republicans on the other side of the aisle trying to create definitions and say Rashida wants to annihilate people, when Max Miller himself went on TV and said we're turning Gaza into a parking lot and we want to annihilate Palestinians. Nobody condemned him on that side of the aisle. What is true here is that every single one of them has not acknowledged the fact that Palestinians are dying in the tens of thousands, but will continue to say it is us who are not acknowledging humanity. Rashida will stand strong.
Gentlelady's time has expired.
The movement will continue for liberation until every single
Gentlelady's time has
Palestinian
expired.
has the right to
Gentleman
live
from
in
Maryland
liberty.
is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, on October 7th, Hamas terrorists paraglided into a music festival and began an unprovoked spree of violence. Babies were beheaded, young girls raped, hundreds kidnapped, and many murdered in vile ways. To compare a modern democracy with a repressive terrorist state is wrong. But it is also wrong for Congress to take this action at a time when we have serious issues that we face, to take an action and take down the words, to strike the words, to censure a fellow member, no matter how incorrect we believe she may be, is wrong. We lower ourselves when we try to take action against someone else for their words. We all go back to our districts, and thank goodness social media hasn't caught every one of us with everything that we say back in our districts, because we would all be standing here. This is a wrong time to do this. It is the wrong action to take. Let's pass a resolution condemning this kind of language, condemning anti-Semitism on college campuses and elsewhere. But it is absolutely wrong to vote for this motion, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Maryland reserves.
We reserve.
Gentleman from Georgia reserves.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I have images of 3 politicians in my office: Abraham Lincoln, Robert F. Kennedy, and Samuel F. Bellman, who was the first Jewish person ever elected to the Minnesota legislature, a great champion of civil rights and civil liberties in the Constitution and of the creation of the State of Israel, the Jewish democratic state, in 1948. And he was my grandfather. He was elected at a time of terrible anti-Semitism. Not unlike today, Minneapolis was actually called the anti-Semitism capital of America. And my grandpa told me a story I'll never forget. The Democratic Farm Labor Party and Republican caucuses both had their annual retreats at a country club that did not allow Jews or blacks to enter. My grandfather complained privately to the speaker about the fact he wouldn't be able to go to his own retreat, and the speaker apologized but said that it was a tradition. So my grandfather, the only Jewish person in the chamber, spoke on the floor about anti-Semitism, and he was booed and jeered at, and members left as he tried to speak. When the minority leader asked me to manage our time today, I thought about my grandfather and how he must have felt on that day. So I rise here not in spite of the fact that I am a Jewish American who supports the Constitution and the Jewish democratic state and hates all the anti-Semitic tyrants and terrorists of the world, from Putin in Russia and Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia to Hezbollah and Hamas. I am here because of these things and because of everything that I believe in and stand for. At this moment, when democracy is under siege all over the world, America must stand tall for the Constitution of the United States, and this resolution is about one thing and one thing only: the punishment of speech. So we have the chance to show the world what the American Constitution means and how we hold fast to our core principles, even when we're drawn away from them by our passions and our righteous anger. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the very heart of it is our First Amendment, which protects every citizen's freedom of speech and says Congress shall make no law abridging it. The freedom to speak includes the freedom to disagree, the right to think radically differently from the majority about important things, or else it is no freedom at all. It's easy to defend freedom of speech for people when you agree with them. The test for each member today is whether you can defend freedom of speech for people when you most fundamentally and vehemently disagree with them. The First Amendment is like an apple, and everybody wants to take just one little bite out of it. Left-wing speech, right-wing speech, sexist speech, feminist speech, homophobic speech, pro-LGBTQ speech, anti-war speech, pro-war speech, religious speech, sacrilegious speech. Everybody just wants one bite out of the apple. But you know what? At the end of the day, once everybody's taken his or her bite, you know what's left? Nothing. There's nothing left. If you want to save the apple, you have to learn to tolerate not just the speech you love the most, but the speech you hate the most. Now, like the First Amendment, the Speech or Debate Clause embodies this central value in the proceedings of this body. It states that members of Congress shall in all cases, except treason, felony, and breach of the peace, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses and in going to and from the same. And for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. In the 2.5-century history of this great chamber, members have been overwhelmingly censured for their actions, not for their speech. Actions like participating in the violent assault against Charles Sumner of Massachusetts, assaulting Representative Josiah Grinnell of Iowa with a cane, selling military academy appointments, taking bribes, engaging in mail fraud and payroll fraud, improper spending of campaign funds, embezzling congressional money, engaging in sexual misconduct with a House page. Do you see the difference? It's not what they said, it's what they did. And I can find only 3 categories of cases where speech is the sum and substance of the charge, and all are exceptions that have been ratified by the Supreme Court. 1, violent threats against other members of this body, which, as the court has found as recently as April, are not protected by the First Amendment. 2, fighting words, the use of unparliamentary or aggressively insulting language on the House floor that constitute a direct affront to another member. And the Supreme Court has said that fighting words are not protected. 3, speech advocating or promoting treason, secession, or insurrection, all of them outside of the First Amendment because of numerous provisions in our Constitution condemning and opposing insurrection. That's it. Violent threats against other members, fighting words on the floor, speech inciting insurrection. The resolution offered against the gentlewoman from Michigan is all about censuring her for her political speech, and literally nothing else. No actions, no conduct is being alleged or punished. The entire motion is about her speech and how much we hate it and how wrong we think it is. And all of that is fine for all of us to express individually on the floor, in the media, on the social media. And I have said to Ms. Tlaib myself that the phrase "from the river to the sea" is abhorrent to me, even with her published explanation of what she means by it, which is very different from what Hamas says about it and uses it. But I would never think of punishing her or disciplining her because we disagree about that. But the resolution proposes to condemn her for quoting this objectionable phrase in her video, a video which is indisputably protected speech under the First Amendment. Unlike the gentleman from New York, Mr. Santos, whose proposed expulsion by members of the majority was rejected by a commanding bipartisan majority last week because he's not been convicted of either the criminal or ethics charges outstanding against him. Ms. Tlaib has been criminally charged with nothing. She's been civilly sued for nothing, and she has no ethics charges outstanding before the Ethics Committee in any way. And it's easy to see why. She cannot face criminal punishment or civil liability for her speech because the United States of America, we don't punish people for their political ideas, no matter how wrong-headed or offensive we think they are. And the majority might think they are, or it might not, but in any event, it doesn't make any difference. She won re-election with 71% of the vote in Michigan's 12th district, and if anyone's going to punish her for her political ideas or performance, it must be the people of her own district who sent her here to represent them. Mr. Speaker, the disciplinary process should never be used to punish the political speech or viewpoints of a member of this chamber just because the majority disagrees. The punishment of political viewpoints will mean that members will be censured just for being in the minority rather than in the majority, and that will come to stifle our dialogue and haunt all of our work. For example, the good Speaker of the House, who is my friend from the Judiciary Committee, has taken positions in the past arguing that sex between consenting gay adults should be a crime, that the Supreme Court was wrong to strike down sodomy laws in Lawrence versus Texas, and wrong to give gay people the right to marry in Obergefell, a right that he said is, quote, the dark harbinger of chaos and sexual anarchy that could doom even the strongest republic. Now, the vast majority of Americans reject these positions as extreme in public opinion polls and believe all citizens should have the freedom to pursue their own love lives and to marry. If the House majority changes hands, should we actually censure the former Speaker of the House for his constitutional apostasy and thought crimes against the rights of millions of Americans? I sure hope not, because the gentleman from Louisiana is absolutely entitled to his political and religious views, no matter how far outside the constitutional and American mainstream they are. Under the First Amendment, extremism is in the eye of the beholder. But how will we resist the temptation to punish him in the future if we set a precedent today that members can be censured and canceled simply for their political heresies in the eyes of the majority controlling the House? If we say the gentlelady can be punished because her views of history are wrong, as I heard my friend say, can we then punish members of this body who refuse to vote to take down in our halls statues of members of Congress from the 19th century who joined the Confederacy and committed treason against the Union? People like John Breckinridge, a former vice president and U.S. senator who was expelled from the Senate after he defected to the Confederacy? Should we use the disciplinary process to impose historical orthodoxy? If anything, there's a stronger constitutional case for punishing the 120 members of the House who voted against taking down statues of Confederate traitors because multiple provisions of the Constitution explicitly forbid and punish participation in insurrection. Do members who voted that way want to risk being censured in the future by establishing that divergent minority views on history are a legitimate matter of institutional discipline? And what about the members who defended conspiracy theorist Alex Jones and stated that Sandy Hook and Parkland mass murders of dozens of school children were staged by Hollywood to generate support for gun safety? That's not even a matter of opinion, but adjudicated positive fact, and still, the Constitution protects your right to be wrong about facts unless you're deliberately defrauding or cheating someone out of something like money or campaign contributions. And what of all of those members who have followed the former president in advancing the big lie that he actually won the 2020 election? Should we convert the 60 federal and state court decisions rejecting claims of election fraud and corruption into discipline and punishment of members who still cling to that view? What about the 11 members of this body who lost the 405-11 vote in 2019, recognizing that the mass killing of Armenians by Ottoman Turks during World War I was a genocide? Does their denial of the genocidal character of the deaths of more than 1 million Armenians qualify them for collective punishment today, institutional punishment? Can we convert differing interpretations of history into the basis for disciplinary action? Well, perhaps you say political dissent should be uniquely punishable when it comes to foreign policy. But of course, the First Amendment doesn't distinguish between speech having domestic or foreign policy content. All of it is protected. If not, every member of this body who's voted against aid to Ukraine and praises Vladimir Putin, as the former president did, for his genius and his savvy, or says Putin is not our enemy, as a number of members have, could be censured for it by this body. This resolution not only degrades our Constitution, but it cheapens the meaning of discipline in this body for people who actually commit wrongful actions like bribery, fraud, violent assault, and so on. When people are punished for their political ideas and expression, they will wear it as a badge of honor. They will fundraise on it. Millions of dollars will flow in to people who are punished that way, and they will join the public in mocking the new speech censors of Congress. A secure constitutional republic which actively protects the freedom of dissenting speech to allow for serious debate and growth as a society shows its strength, not its weakness. As Thomas Jefferson, whose beautiful statue is right outside of this room, put it, if there be any among us who would wish to dissolve this union or to change its republican form, let them stand undisturbed as monuments of the safety with which error of opinion may be tolerated where reason is left free to combat it. Now is a moment when we will get to see who in the House of the Representatives believes in the freedom of speech, even the speech they hate, versus those who want to impose a new political straitjacket of cancel culture on America and Congress. I reserve.
Gentleman from Maryland reserves.